Morning. This is Dale Savage with the New Mexico State Library Development on August 9th, 2019. And we're here for the second webinar in a series on strategic plans that will be good from 2020 to 2023. The two topics we'll cover today briefly will be who should be involved in your strategic plan and community engagement. So the strategic plans, basically public libraries will need to have an up-to-date approved 3-year strategic plan, and that's required to be in place July 2020. And there's some bare minimum elements that are required. You're welcome to do more, but at a minimum, an approved plan should require a vision statement, a mission statement, 2 goals with objectives, an evaluation plan for the plan, and potential partners and community assets, and that can be in an appendix. So what we're going to talk about today is who should be involved. There are a lot of roles in the strategic planning process. Not everyone involved is involved in everything, but at a minimum, library staff should be involved. If you're a one-person library, then that's kind of a no-brainer. If you have more than one staff person in your library, then to the extent possible, it's really good to have library staff involved, both because they know the library and also because any directions that you go to take, it's good for the library staff to be involved in processing the ideas and coming up with the ideas, and they'll be the ones who will be implementing the ideas. And of course, your library board or friends group, somebody from the group should be involved during the planning process, and of course at the end of the process you'll want to present your plan to the library board. You may want to have a facilitator or a consultant. Be paid or they can be unpaid. If your library has a budget for strategic planning, sometimes, very often, it's helpful to have someone who is not a part of the planning process in the sense of making decisions or anything of that nature, but rather somebody who can actually help the group develop a plan to plan, and help guide the discussions that the group has so that you achieve your goals at each stage as you go through. You might want somebody from the local schools, because it's very obvious that the library is situated in a community, and the schools are a very important part of that community, and the library can be an important part of meeting the educational goals that people want for the community. So it's good to have someone, if possible, from the schools agree to participate in the project. You may want somebody from the local government. Might be like a town manager or a mayor or an influential city council person. You do want to be sure, if you can, if you invite somebody from local government to be a part of the process and have an input and to help develop the plan, hopefully you'll get somebody that is a supporter of the library. Not necessarily a library user, but somebody who sees the library as having a positive role to play in the community. You may want to involve some of your library users. and uh, you know, they may be people from the friends group. It may be somebody who doesn't have any formal connection to the library, but somebody who uh, is a part of the community. And in fact, there are ways that the users can be involved and should be involved, uh, quite apart from your planning committee. Uh, you'll want to reach out and make sure that non-users and their opinions uh, and they have input into the process if at all possible. If you have a teams group and you have a really sharp teen in the community, it might be good to have one of those involved in your committee. And anyone else that you might think of that would be strategic to ask to participate or to ask in terms of the gathering information that you need for creating your your plan. So who should be involved? Second aspect to think about this are the roles. What roles will some of those different people we talk about play? And obviously, one of them is as a part of a planning team. And I'll just want to say it's best if your team really doesn't sort of your core team doesn't get to be more than maybe 7 or 8 people, which is not to say you might involve others for different parts, but sort of that core part of the team that's going to meet together maybe on a monthly basis, maybe a little sooner, be people that have the ability to commit to the process. Your planning team, you want to be with you from the time you start talking about gathering data and moving through using the data you gather and analyzing it and looking at it and setting goals and objectives and creating a vision for your library and a mission statement for your library. So those are people who should really be with you and who'll say, yeah, I'll commit to meeting, let's say once a month for 5 months, and I'll commit to, working on the data, doing other things that need to be done. You might involve somewhere along the line, and this might bring in your library users, maybe some non-users, different people in the community, a focus group, to get people together and have people talk about some of the issues that'll come up for your planning process. Your focus group will probably only have to be available once, maybe for 2 or 3 hours or an evening or something. And community members just at large, maybe people that are available to provide information. They might just be somebody you do a brief interview with, or you ask a question of, or that respond to questions that you pose to the community in one or more ways that you have. So basically, you do want involvement sort of across the spectrum. And it's really good if you have people who see the community, see the library as a positive influence in the community, but they may not necessarily be people who even have a library card. And that's particularly true. I found at times like when I was director of a library or I was a county librarian, that some of those influential people that were willing to support the library weren't necessarily library users, and they were good people to involve in the discussions. So community engagement, we'll move to the other part, and this is where we'll be spending the bulk of what we're going to talk about during the day. So community engagement, why does it matter? Why would you want to engage the community in terms of creating a strategic plan for your library? And basically, in the simplest answer, it's because the library isn't really about the library. The library exists in the community to meet the needs of the community. And so your library should really be focused on what the needs and the goals and the aspirations are in the community. So it's about the individuals and the community as a whole in which it's situated. So that's what you want your library to focus on. You want it to focus on the community. So what kind of information do we need for a good strategic plan? And this is just really basic. There's a lot more, lot of other places you can go, but at a sort of a bare minimum, you want to know what the felt needs are for the individuals in your library's community. What's on their mind? What is it that uh, what are their sort of immediate needs? And those can be a number of things. You know, they can be like needs for recreation. They can be educational needs. Uh, they can be needs, you know, quite beyond that. But they can be things that your library can participate in helping them get information and programming and other things to meet those needs. You also want to know about the longer term aspirations for the individuals in your library's community. You know, it's one thing to know like what's on our mind right now, what are the pressing issues we're facing, but then also for the individuals in your community, uh, what are their sort of blue sky dreams? What are the things that they want to reach for and hope for, and things that the library can interact with them about to meet those longer term aspirational things. You also want to know what the individual's aspirations are for the community itself. What kind of place uh, individuals in the community want your community to be, and you know, what can the library do for that? You probably also, while you're doing a planning process, want to ask the community about what their aspirations are for the library itself. The library, as I said, is a part of the community, and it's a part of the community that the individuals in the community look to meet certain types of needs, and there may be needs that the library can fit into as well that the community is not quite aware of yet. So there may be other questions that are specifically of interest to the library's strategic planners. Very often when libraries get ready to do a strategic plan, one of the things they'll do is they'll do a scan of trends among other libraries in the country, and they'll see what kinds of things, interesting things that the libraries around the state or around the country may be involved in. And sometimes libraries will pick a trend, and as part of the strategic planning process, we'll try to figure out if one or two trends that are going on might be something that would be of interest to the community. And one of the ways to find out is to ask questions of the community while you're doing the planning process. So then that begs the question, how do we collect that kind of information? Again, in the simplest form, you say we can ask, but there's several ways in which we can ask. We can interview key people about community needs and priorities. One example of that, one of the first places that I heard of somebody, it wasn't in relation to a full-blown strategic plan, but in relation to sort of a change in direction and the way the library interacted with the community. Jamie LaRue, who at the time was the director of the Douglas County Libraries in Colorado, decided that one of the ways that he would figure out how to get librarians more in things that were high priority for the community is he would start off by interviewing key people about community needs and priorities. And what he basically did is he drew up a list of influential people in the community. Some of them were people who worked in different municipal governments, county government officials, but also business people and leaders of some of the nonprofits. I think there may have been some religious leaders, but different people who were influencers were key people. And he would invite them to lunch along with one of his librarians. And they basically had a series of questions that over lunch they would involve. It's, what do you see as uh, some of the key community needs and priorities that need to be addressed, where you are. And they would take note of those. Later, Jamie circled back as they went through the process, and he managed to get, uh, in this approach, he embedded librarians in different committees and groups around the community as someone who could serve as a resource to those groups that were trying to affect positive change in the community. Another way to get information is to interview the community at large. And ALA, if you Google ALA turning outward, you'll see there's quite a series of resources that were developed uh, to help libraries connect with their communities in meaningful ways. I'm actually going to go to that page for a moment, and I'm going to share my web browser. And if you Google the ALA and turning outward, you'll find a link to this page. As you can see, it's a page of turning outward resources for libraries. First paragraph at the top, the tools below are libraries strengthen their role as community leaders and bring about positive change in their communities. And there are tools for helping you to understand your library and thinking about your library staff, uh, finding out about the aspirations of the community, uh, getting self-assessments on working with people. And then there's also one that's kind of a simple thing. If you'll notice down in the green section here, I'll just point you to one resource, the Ask exercise, which you can download there. But if we go here, you can see this is one way to get at some of those types of questions. In this one, they suggest this is for talking to people one-on-one, kind of a real quick interview that says we're trying to learn more about people's aspirations for the community. Would you be willing to answer 4 quick questions? And the first one is, what kind of community do you want to live in? And then, why is that important to you? And how is that different from how you see things now? And a follow-up question to that, the 4th question is, what are some of the things that need to happen to create that kind of change? And as you can see, that's a specific type of questioning that's getting at individuals' aspirations, longer-term aspirations, and probably immediate aspirations too, about the type of community that they live in. So there's, on this turning outward page, there's several resources for getting started with that, and including one on how to have a community conversation. It's kind of a focus group, and there's a guide for how to facilitate those types of discussions with groups. So I'm going to go back now to our slideshow, to the PowerPoint, to the presentation, and we will go down. It kind of bumped me out of the place we were. This is where we were. All right. And this. So we can ask, we can interview the community at large. We can also conduct focus groups, which I said those ALA turning outward tools. There's some of those there that can help you conduct those focus groups, particularly on community issues. And another type of way, and we're going to go into this as an example, and I'll give you an example from a specific library, is you can use whiteboards and stickies. You can use social media like a Facebook page. People can comment, and other clever ideas, including one that a friend who was formerly a library director in a small town in Wisconsin and now works with the Wisconsin State Library. When she was director, one of the things that she did, she particularly wanted to be sure she was also engaging community members who weren't coming into the library. She got a series of like artificial Christmas trees, and there's a type of cardboard tag that has like twine on it that you see a lot like in hardware stores. And she got a series of those uh, hardware store tags with strings, and she put community trees in like grocery stores and like the town hall and different other places out in the community, along with the questions, that had to do like with like those ask questions. There were questions about, what people would like to see in the community. And the idea was people could write anonymously their ideas on those tags, and then they could tie them onto the Christmas tree. And then later they would collect the ideas. And actually that kind of leads into, so, okay, once you get people's responses, so what do we do with that information? How do you use it? And we'll talk about that just briefly, and I'll show you a little bit of something that could be used with as sort of a mini training exercise with your strategic planning team. But the first thing basically is you turn the answers into a text or texts, and this is like what anthropologists and social scientists do with sort of amorphous information from a lot of different individuals. When they write out their notebooks or when they interview people, they get lists of responses, they write up their interview notes, uh, things of that nature. So you turn a list of responses as a type of text, or your interview notes from different people are a type of text. So then what you do with that is you have the planning team look for themes inside that list of responses, inside those answers that you're getting for people. You look at the commonalities, uh, and you kind of group answers together, and then sometimes you find you can actually group uh, sort of themes into larger themes. But you use those themes then to better understand the community's needs and aspirations. And I'm going to show you an example of that just in a little bit. And then ultimately, once you've identified the themes and identified what's on the mind of the community, both for the individuals and their aspirations and their needs and their desires for the community, you integrate that understanding into your strategic plan. And that can affect your library's mission, but very specifically, uh, you should use that kind of information in creating those goals and objectives that you have that you want to follow. So as an example, I mentioned this, uh, the Worthington Library in Ohio, which is a relatively good-sized community. It's one of the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. Uh, had 2 or 3 branches, I forget which, but basically they used whiteboards with stickies, and they used social media. They used their Facebook page to collect information. And what they did, they created a series of 5 questions, and they posted them one a week on the whiteboard and on their Facebook page. And people could write anonymously a response to the question. They'd stick it up on the whiteboard, and the library staff would collect those, and then they a list of the responses to each question, and then they use those to create themes and to build an understanding of their community. So, like the 5 questions, one of them was, before I die, I want to X, whatever that is. And that's kind of the bucket list question. It's a way to look at, what are the aspirations that the people in the community have for the long term? What is it that I'd really like to be able to do? Sort of the pie in the sky. Some of them are achievable things. Some of them may not be. But what are the people in your community really thinking about long term? And 2 was, what's one thing that would make your life better? And that gets to the felt need. In other words, what are the things that right now, if I just stop and think about it, what's something that I really would say would really improve my life? Third question, and this gets to the community aspirations. What's the one thing that would make our community better? And then here's the one where I was saying about, trend scanning or trend scanning, looking at sort of what types of things might the public respond to in the library that we already have on our mind, or we've seen that are good examples. And Worthington at that time, I think it was 2015, asked the question, what equipment or technology would you like to try, use, or learn? And they were thinking about, getting maybe some tablets, maybe smartphone programs, 3D printers, different things like that. So they were asking a question that related to something that they were thinking might be interesting for their community. And then finally, their 5th question was kind of an open-ended statement. My dream library would. So, what would I like to see for the future of my library? And I'm going to share with you just kind of the sample answers, sample there, and they're real answers from when they did their strategic plan that the Worthington Library came up with. So let me go back up here, and I'll stop sharing that, and I will share a different thing. Let's go here. All right, not that, but let's see. I'm sharing that. Okay, we'll go here. And here's the question. What's your vision for the library's future? I won't get into this in detail. This is the page I was saying you could use as a practice for helping your strategic planning team look for themes within responses to questions. But you can look and see first response that's on this page is, I'm all in favor of ebooks, but I hope you'll still concentrate on paper books. I need something to do during power outages and read at times when ebooks aren't safe or practical. Another response was to be able to come, presumably to the library, at any time of the day. One of the responses was better kids CDs. Here's another one, bigger and more books. Somebody wanted them to carry Wii and DS games. Number 6, put a coffee house in the library. 7, somebody said downstairs is too loud. And 11 is somebody who was really comprehensive. I believe that there will be more libraries around the country, and this library will grow larger, including books and movies, and maybe even you could check out games, board games, Wii's, DS, Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, you name it. And here's one talking about their dream library. Says, I desperately hate the carpet Berber coverings that block the return slots. They're cumbersome and they only get in the way. If it were up to me, I'd remove them. Somebody else says, I agree with removing the carpet covering the return slot. Another, here to removing the carpet covering the return slots. You got more books and DVDs, more books and DVDs, more books and movies. So you see there are themes that are coming up that are in there. Here's another one, more story time. Somebody said, put on soft music. Another one says, don't put on soft music. So basically you can see there's a lot of information in that. So we're going to go back to our presentation and come back to current slide. Okay. So if you look at that, we look for themes under my dream library would. The library found out that there were themes that dealt with collections and materials. There were themes that dealt with technology and with facilities and with program. But one of the interesting things that when you could boil a lot of it down to people envisioned more of what the library is already doing. They really wanted to keep up with lending books and with CDs and DVDs and games and programming and things, but they wanted more of it. They figured that in the future the library would continue to grow and it would do that as well. So now we're going to switch back again, and this time we're going to look and we'll take up the other question, another of the questions. What's one thing that would make your life better? And if you look, here's a sample again. These are from the actual library surveys that were done. People were interested in what's one thing that would make your life better? $1 million. $1 zillion, somebody else said. One of them said a genie for the rest of my life. Or a house elf from Harry Potter. But then you look and you see another here, a life with a happy family. You have to figure there's probably a story there. Somebody else was a little more modest, but they said a little bit more. I assume this is supposed to be money. Someone else said a personal chef. Or here's one, number 8, a puppy from my parents. Or here's one, all my family together. Or an accepting family. Cooking my own food. Don't let my parent die. Or here's one, I'd like endless amounts of time and money so I could travel the world. We have one. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Here's one, get a dog and no homework and a servant. Or 20 is get a pet, like a cute little or big dog, get a pig, get a pug, having a little sister, having more cats in my house. Now here's one, having really good friends and helping animals. But then you also occasionally see things like number 44, not having to worry about how to feed my family with limited groceries. And so, you can see there's a lot of different types of information that are coming in the responses that people are having to that simple question that at first glance you might think is not necessarily a library strategy question, but in a real sense, you can find that it is. So we went through that. So then the themes on this one, what one thing would make your life better? As the group analyzed the responses, including the ones that we were just looking at, they found out one of the themes was freedom. And for some people it involved time, and for some people it involved money, but money and time to be about freedom. Freedom to do things, freedom, to not have the worries that not having money involves. There are also themes that involved pets and family, but they said, those two both, sort of were about affection and food and fantasy. There was, having a genie for the rest of my life, or there were others that dealt with fantasy. But basically, they looked through and they were able to boil down the information they found in those themes. People long for more freedom in their lives, and they seek warmth and affection in their relationships, and they're both practical minded with themselves concerning food and diet, but they're also whimsical, wishing for magical or fantastical scenarios. And you might think, okay, what does that have to do with a library strategic plan? And there's a couple of things that you might think about right away in terms of your goals and objectives, particularly like concerning, let's say, programming. If there's a lot of concern about financial issues that come up in your strategic planning, community engagement efforts, you might think, well, maybe I could get involved with somebody from the local bank and we could work out a series of programs around financial literacy. Or you might decide, hey, there's several things here that I'm seeing that are felt needs for people, things that they say would make their life better. We could plan some of our collection development around. Maybe if it's food and healthy eating and some other things, maybe some books about gardening, really basic books about how to grow vegetables in your backyard. Or maybe it might, there might be some things in there that would be related to things you'd want to think about your collection with cookbooks and other things. But the basic idea is when you get information of this sort, it can help you inform you when you think about what are the types of things that we want to be sure that we do and we accomplish in the next couple of years, because we know they're relevant to the community, because we've asked. We know they're relevant to people's lives, but also things that we know are relevant to what kind of community it is that people want us to be. And, how can we help the library be situated as kind of a hub in that? Now, we're going to have the recording of this posted on the page for webinars and things on the state library's webpage. But I'll also include, in case you'd like to use it for practice in looking for themes and helping your strategic planning committee get ready for analyzing information you get from the community. I'll include those 2 pages that you saw from the Worthington, Ohio strategic planning process. And I'll also put up a copy of their strategic plan. It's only about 9 pages. It's very simple. It showed a timeline of what they did. But also back on about page 7, they talked about asking the 5 questions in the community. And they gave 3 or 4 paragraphs of what they learned from their community by asking those questions and analyzing them. So I hope that'll be a help to you. We're going to wrap up for today, and webinars 3 and 4 will be coming soon. On our August 28th, we'll give a brief webinar again on community asset mapping. We'll talk about vision and mission and what they are, what the difference is between them. And then on September 26th, we'll do the last of our webinars on strategic planning. One part of it will be on defining the goals and objectives. In other words, how do you use that information you've been getting to develop the goals and objectives? And then we'll talk about planning to evaluate the strategic plan and the results you're getting from it, and whether it needs to be adjusted through the process or whatever. And just like to mention too that we don't have definite plans on this yet, but if 3 or 4 libraries that are located near each other would be interested in having library development staff come out and do like a one-day workshop to help with the strategic planning process and to give a little more practice in some of the aspects, we would be happy to do that, possibly in October or November. October and November, possibly September if a request came early enough. But we'll just leave you with that for now. And thank you for joining us today. And feel free to contact Library Development if you have any questions about your strategic planning process for the coming year.